whenever I speak to him, even now, you'll say things like, "Are you bust yet? You gone bust yet?" You know.
I put too much in to not prioritise work over everything else.
The biggest thing then you really need, aside from obviously working capital, is people. It's people to do it.
The way I see most councils is it's like walking into an Oxfam and going, right, you lot, I want you to run a business, okay? So all of you come with me. And that is just the sort of nature of dealing with the
be profitable.
Yeah.
Okay, no.
Margaret, put that down. You've got some work to do.
You're on sales.
That's funny.
Roundup sound, ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay them down, let's get those deals. Deals making money, baby.
Welcome back. Anyone listening, this is episode 28 of the Ground Up Podcast. Stuart couldn't make it with us this morning because he's looking after little ones. He didn't get any sleep. But,
Stuart's been dealing with the councils.
He said, I'm up, boys, but I'm fucked.
Bless him. He came on my site open day yesterday, and he
how did that go?
Made the effort to come to all 3 sites, and I do love him. He's good energy, isn't he, Stu?
He's very good energy. That's, I mean, I could just imagine him now, sat in his armchair, just staring, because this kid's been up all night, like, you know, just.
Yeah. I mean, it does put me off kids a little bit. I don't know about you, Rye, but being on this podcast with Dorian and Stuart, I just couldn't act the unpredictable nights.
I tell you what, it did take me a couple of years, mine, to change my mentality, because I'm quite a structured person with you know, I've got a structured routine and a plan and a never-ending to-do list and never-ending stuff to do. And if I get thrown off course, you know, it does my it does my head in, basically, and it makes you get quite angry and irritable. But
yeah,
kids are, as you said there, they're just so unpredictable. You'll have a plan, like Stuart. You know, we had a plan, and they just come in and just smash the plan up.
I'm really like you. I'm like very efficient and organised, and obviously my first flavour of it is dogs. They're not efficient or organised. There's got to be serious compromise there, and yeah, I've got to adjust, I'm sure.
I think I just definitely, if to have kids, like just have a nanny, like just makes the most sense.
Yeah,
just need a nanny, you know.
I completely agree.
Like, why not take the edge off it? Oh.
We started. I started with that mentality, but it wasn't reciprocated with my other half. So
yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes the missus could get funny about that sort of, like, another lady looking after my. I don't think so. I'm more than capable. I'll look after it. It's like, yeah, but at the same time, have some sleep. Let the nanny do it.
I got in there and pre-agreed it early, and the missus is already on board, and we've got it documented.
Yeah, you've got a contract and everything. You have, Jack.
I had to set parameters if we're going to get. It's a big decision, isn't it?
Jack's wife had to go to a different solicitor and get independent legal advice before she signed, so there was no recourse.
She did. So, I mean, it's for me, it's like slightly different from you guys, because, you know, when we're obviously married, she's American, I'm English. When you throw a kid into the mix, she can't just go home. We can't just break up and she go back to the US. So I wanted to make it explicitly clear that, you know, obviously that's never going to happen, and why would you ever think that's ever going to happen? But I wanted to make it explicitly clear that when you have a child, that's both of ours. So I said, if we have a kid, it's staying in the UK regardless, because you know, she can't come over here and then over there. And to be fair, that wasn't actually the main topical point. I did say the kid can't, you know, live in the US, or it's got to be in the UK. But the main topical points was how is it going to work, you know, around work, because I know that I'm already devoting a lot to our businesses, and that needs to be understood from the other side, so that before we get into it, she's aware of how much I can put in. But I think it's healthy to have those sort of preemptive conversations. Otherwise, I think it's important. Conversations drive better success. That's always my view.
I think anybody listening. Oh, sorry, Roy, go on.
No, go on, mate, go on.
I was just saying, anybody listening to this that's like in employment, or always has been in employment, and looking to, you know, make a big change and get into like property, whatever, in whatever fashion, construction, investment, development. I would, one of the main reasons why people don't do it is because when you start out, when you've already got a job, and that takes up like 8-9 hours of your day, and then you've also already got a family, another half, and all that sort of stuff. There's only one way to start, really, isn't it? And that is by using those hours, the pre-work, post-work, to advance. But then straight away, you put this ugly dynamic in your relationship, and people talk about work-life balance and stuff, but for me, it is just one of the same. Like, work is life, life is work, as well as everything else together. You just gotta mingle with it,
Yeah, man, I agree with the setting ground rules. All my last relationships during the band and then I met Honor, and I've been with Honor since we've done property. But I've always said from day one, like, deep chats straight away, get them out of the way, and I'll always say, look, work. I've given up too much in my life to work, paying myself very next to nothing, working all hours. I don't go parties, giving up social lives like that. I've put too much in to not prioritize work over everything else. So just know that if you're going to be with me, work's always going to come first. And one day, when I'm super successful, then we'll both benefit from that. That's always been just to make sure that's clear at the start, rather than in the future you never come out on these weekends, you never come to these parties, and it's like, I told you day one that I wasn't going to do that shit, because you don't have a choice, do you? Really?
I got more of a so obviously we've tried different things over the years, but one thing that at the minute, for the past few years really, is I said to my my wife, pretend, or just because the problem is when you're your own boss as well, they think you have a lot more flexibility and in theory you do, but then you set a bad example then for everybody else, because everybody else who works for you has defined holidays. They can't just decide not to turn up, for the day and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, look, so if I do that, it sets a bad example. But one thing I said to my wife is, pretend Monday to Friday that I work away. There's some people out there that their jobs they work away Monday to Friday. Yep. And that's basically what you got to pretend mentally I've got to do. That's my job. I'm working away Monday to Friday. So I'm not tracking hours. If I have to be up at 5 a.m. and I'm not back till 7, 8 o'clock at night, it is what it is. It is what it is. Yep. And then but on the weekends now I do a lot more stuff with the family. So that's kind of the compromise we've got to.
I had to set so exactly the same. My wife would just call me in the middle of the day, and I'll always pick up, because if anyone in my close proximity or close friends calls me, one thing I always want to make sure I do is pick up the phone.
And shout out to Jack. I rang him the other day, and he had a mouthful of food and his intimate dinner with his missus, and he still picked up to me. And when I found,
he had an hour drive ahead of him, was hoping to have chew the fat, and I was chewing the fat.
It was.
But Kelly always thinks because I'm in the office and because I picked up, I'm free just to have a chat about why our dog's still lying in bed at midday, and what the weather's like and all that sort of stuff. Well, not all the weather, like Americans don't understand why we talk about the weather, but just have a chat. And I'm literally, sometimes I don't even have enough time to eat. Like, that is how jam-packed my days are. I sometimes get to 5 o'clock and I go, haven't actually eaten today. Yeah. So I just go, is it urgent? And she'll go, no. And I'll go, well, I'm busy. And what I actually had to communicate with her is, because she works as a fitness trainer. So she's either running a class or she's completely free. That's kind of like her role. And she only does a few hours a day. So she's mostly completely free, which is why she calls me, because she's been stirring around for 3 hours and goes, wonder what Jack's up to. Guess what? He's busy. But anyway, she'll call me and I'll go, I am the equivalent of teaching a class all day. So the whole of the day. So it's like me calling you when you're telling everyone what they're doing. That's me every minute of every day. That's my busy time. Yeah. And it runs from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. and then it's a little bit more flexible. But it's like she if I went out for coffee,
I bet you have one of those automatic, when someone rings you on the phone and then you can press one of those automatic messages. I bet you Jack has this stuff in spin class, in HIIT, in all the way down.
Anyway, so there you go.
Man. Yeah, definitely. If you run, I mean, I actually said to the missus recently, because obviously we've just got the flat, so we've just all this stuff we're talking about here are things I've had to be dealing with recently as like a change of lifestyle to get the flat in London. And I'm literally doing a work away from home Monday to Friday and then down on the weekends. Like that's physically, that is actually what I'm doing, which is quite funny. But there's a good balance with it as well, though. I do feel like it means I can crack on with my shit. She can crack on with her shit all week. We don't really need to talk or anything. And then come down then just have like a nice weekend, still do some work. But there's a balance in that. But definitely from the start of a relationship, if you're a business owner, like I've watched so many people lose their businesses or lose their way in their career because of relationships and demands in relationships. And it's like when you're this young, I think you shouldn't be too open to that. Maybe that's a bit of a miserable outlook on life, but you've only got your younger years to throw yourself at stuff and really apply yourself before you have kids, and then it's much harder to get ahead again.
Yeah, interesting.
So
I've got a question for you two. When you were growing up, was business talked about at the dinner table?
Oh, all the time,
yeah,
all the time.
Yeah.
That was very much family house.
When I was growing up, my dad is very sensitive, i.e., gets really pissed off about like silence at the dinner table or like the sound of eating and stuff like that. So it's like if you really want to wind my dad up, open a bag of crisps and just start eating right next to him.
No, I'm the same, mate. I hate the sound of people eating.
So we hardly ate together anyway because we wasn't the type of family that would eat dinner together because my dad would just work. He was an old school builder and he didn't abide by work hours. His motto was the job's done when the job's done. If that's 10 o'clock at night, so be it. You know, that was it. So we didn't really, but on the odd occasions we did, the TV would always be on or the radio would be on. You know, it was but in around the house, and because of his like the way he is and his work ethic, when my dad was home, he was always on the phone as well, doing talking about a quote or going to a job or whatever it was. So there was always talk about business, and then there was always arguments as well. So yeah, quite a fun environment.
Both of your dads worked for themselves, didn't they?
Yeah.
Did Stuart's dad work for himself as well?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I think he did. I think he did have a. Did he have a construction company? I can't remember. But I mean, so did mine. It's interesting that we all sort of maybe have that influence. I mean, my dad would bang on about work all the time, and as a kid, he'd always complain about the civil service. And I never really, as a kid, I didn't really understood what he meant. But he's always like, they're destroying the country, and like he'd always go on different rants about how like the bloody public sector, overpaid pensions, the gold parachutes, like, and I'd never quite get it. And now being in property. And obviously, just running a business, you see it and you understand it, and you're like, "Fuck!" For all those years growing up, now I understand why it's so painful for you.
It's funny because my parents didn't actually encourage me to go into business or anything. They actually wanted me to get a proper job, so to speak. You know, it's I was like the only one in my family to go to university and all that sort of stuff. So academically, I was just fortunate to suit well to it and be able to. Just go through the school system well and pass exams and whatever. And I did go to university and I did accountancy, and they wanted me to just get an accountancy job. And I remember that when I because I always had businesses, but when I actually just as I was in university, I actually didn't finish my last year. I basically dropped out, even though I did equivalent to qualified degree level accountancy. I didn't go on to do the next stage. They were both really disappointed about that because my businesses were taken off. So I focused. I got my degree level qualification, and I focused on my business because I wanted to learn accountancy for business. I didn't want to do it as a job, but they were really disappointed because they wanted me to have like a proper job. And it's funny, and I know the way my dad gives praise is like reverse psychology. He doesn't even try to do it. He doesn't give praise. He gives criticism. So every time, all of my businesses, all of the years, whenever I speak to him, even now, you'll say things like, "Are you bust yet? You gone bust yet?" You know. I don't want to talk about a deal, and then you just pick the negative in it. I actually one day I'd made a list of like 100 businesses, and each business is a multi-billion-pound business. And he was in the living room. This was years ago, and I sat down. I was like, right, I want to go through some businesses with you of like ideas of things I want to do. can you tell me whether you think they're good ideas or not? And I went through, I was like, mechanics, having a branch of mechanics, or property investment, still buying properties, opening a window factory, all things like he's been involved with or done anyway. And every single idea, he was like, won't work. No, doesn't work. No, you won't make money. No, you're going to lose money. Like, nothing on there he was positive about. But that also goes to show that I think that to get ahead, you can't really listen to people, even those closest to you. You've just got to sometimes you've just got to go ahead.
Definitely not the old guard as well. The old guard, they're tired from dealing with industry and business, and like they have quite a cynical outlook on some things. Like, to be fair, my dad's a very jovial, happy, like bubbly character, but he's got his cynical views on the financial sector and things like that. And if I wanted to go into finance, he'd probably go, "Oh, it's a sharky world, but do what you please, like do what you enjoy, like give it your best go, but like fucking hell." Whereas if I spoke to a younger gun in the industry now, they'd probably go, "Yeah, mate, loads of money to be made, about all the positives, all the good things." Same in property, innit? Like, we're all pretty enthusiastic about it, but you speak to anyone who's been a developer and they're now in their 50s or 60s, they're like, "Oh, I don't know how you lot will make money these days. Oh, the planning system's fucked. Back in my day, you didn't need this, didn't need that." And
to be fair, I think I'd be like that as well. Like, if I was a developer and you could get plans just from a red line plan, and then all of a sudden it goes to report galore and you still can't get planning, I think I would be exactly the same as well. It's like, bring back the old days.
Like, when did it become like? When did it flip on its head and planning just became?
I can remember doing planning applications where it was just a floor plan, no elevations, none of that shit. So that's only 10, 11 years ago.
I have seen in the past few years, especially since 2000, since Brexit time, and maybe, I would say like Jack 10 years ago probably, that every year they're bringing in something new, because what seems to be happening is, because everything's becoming a lot more mainstream, a lot more digital, a lot more connected, and all of the world's crises are on point. Like, you cannot go across the website, the internet, without finding, a dozen different things going wrong with the world and how the world's going to end, basically, because of all this stuff. And then you have what I feel like in the government, the ministers, they directing policies to just target with their bit, and then it comes direct. Some of those policies come into the planning system, like, for example, the biodiversity crisis was labelled as an emergency, and all of a sudden it came into the planning system. Biodiversity, just straight away. But
it came from ESG targets, isn't it? That was set by some of the major hedge funds, and it was said at the time by like major business, and now you listen to people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and all these other guys at the top of their game, that all in podcasts, those boys talk about it. Like, ESG came in as a way to just toggle the economy, and now it's just a brainwash everywhere. Everything's environmental, everything's got to be carbon neutral, everything's this.
Yeah,
it makes it so much harder to do business.
But then all these different agendas across, government, whether it's placemaking, whether it's connectivity, ecology, surface water, it's all been ramped up in the past decade, and lots of different legislations have come in and just focus points. But the problem is, they've set it all, and they've all got equal priority, if that makes sense. So, and they've all got a staff member in the planning system, a consultee, that has to approve, their section for it to move forward. So if you've got 10 different things now that all need to be approved, and they've got 10 different consultees, and that's their sole agenda, is to make sure that your scheme complies with that, and there's no priority really above it all, and other than when it really gets push comes to shove, but that's like post 2 years delay, you're going to have a bottleneck, a huge problem, because it's fucking hard getting everyone to agree. Honestly,
I think the best way to improve planning is to just do almost like outline planning without any surveys other than maybe like highways. Like obviously highways deal with getting an ambulance and a fire engine down to properties. So it's like a complete package of what the property looks like, how it's usable, and how someone would live there. So it's designed, approved, and then you go into like post planning conditions of what assessments you need. So whether you've got the planning in principle, and then you can go through all the assessments You know, you might go, well, you know, ecology is going to be an issue on the site. Let's do this one first, and if it comes back negative, you then don't have to do the rest. So I think it should be like a phased approach.
But do you think the council should remain the arbiter in that situation, or do you think there should then be an independent body that sort of takes on that resource?
Well, I think it should just be a yes or a no answer beyond that point. Like, it's almost like that you know, the council are saying, if this has, you know, less risk than X to flood, you can still do the development, and then you get a flood risk assessment done by a third party consultant, and then.
But if you could mitigate the flood risk in some way, or there's a way to like get around it, who would then be the stamp of approval? Still the council?
Yeah, the council approve the planning. Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually take that with a pinch. So I think the way the planning should go, anything above 1 unit should be move into the private sector. That's my genuine view, because we'll pay more for it. We'll go out to tender. The people tendering want those contracts because they get regular work.
You know what? Ultimately, that's the solution, because we could play devil's advocate on each other here, come up with solutions, and there's always going to be a problem, and there's always going to be a nuance. And the private sector is great at solving that. If you just give the private sector the problem,
exactly, they've got to compete with competition. They've got to be efficient.
I tell you why they'll resolve it. It's because it has to be commercially viable.
Yeah,
and you can't drag things out for 2 years and it be commercially viable on a £460 a unit application. It'll be, you know, like, you'll have to, people just get around the table and talk through the issues. Practical solutions can be resolved literally most of the time in that same meeting. And then it's like, right, boom, if you do this, 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 and this, or if you can get the report to justify that, and that, then we're good to go. Great, excellent. Like, we've just had a site now. I think I said it previously, so I won't bang on about it. But, like, you know, it's already gone for the planning system. It's taken 12, 18 months, and the 106 process is 5 months. I know, Jack, you've had it longer than that. But that's just stupid. That is just stupid.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. But I mean,
I do have a question though, just from transitioning from that, because we were just talking about their work-life balance and starting, you know, getting into whatever business or property from an employer. What would be your top advice for somebody who's in a job now full time? What would be the key thing for them to transition into their own business or self-employment?
Any business, any business,
anything. Yeah.
You got to start learning, innit? That's the number one numero uno thing, is just start cheap, internet, books, do all that shit, learn about the field you want to go into, and then ideally, I think that now with social media being the way it is, go find someone in that field and look through who they follow. If you can't get hold of them, find other people in that field and just have a coffee with them, see if you can have a chat, have an email exchange, and just start to get some context of what the industry looks and feels like. And then first principles, okay, what's the first baby step for me to get into that industry? Is it to shadow someone? Is it to be more of a consultant? Is it to, there's all kinds of ways into an industry. But if it's a capital intensive industry you want to get into, like you want to become a manufacturer of some good, then you probably should go work for the manufacturing company first and understand top down how that business works. Because I don't think you could learn that stuff from a book. You definitely couldn't give it a go just from a book. But there's other sectors like being a broker or something like that, which you could just, if you learn enough, you probably could just set up day one on the side, get a few clients whilst you're still doing your day job. So it does depend on the sector, doesn't it? Quite hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say totally. I mean, Ryan's points are very clear. Like, learn. I do think it's a good idea to get some sort of mentor or work in a business where you can learn a lot and offer up maybe some of your time for free to do that. I don't believe that anyone will ever really successfully open up their own business unless they're willing to put the hours in. I think that you need, if you want to be a 9-to-5er, I think you'll struggle, because it's not all about doing the extra hours a day. It's when push comes to shove, when you are the business owner, it is going to be demanding. And sometimes you've got to put that time in. But I've always been, one thing that we were always taught in our household was work ethic. And I always put in, I'm happy doing sort of 60 to 80 hour weeks, week in, week out. And if you actually allocate how much time that is to put into a business, you can really get things going. So I'm a massive advocate for that, and I think that if you apply yourself and do additional work outside the hours and you really want it, it's just more about learning, meeting the right people, dipping your toe into something. It's not that difficult to start a business. It's very difficult to run a successful business and keep it going. But the first step is probably the easiest step, coming up with the ideas, bouncing those ideas off other people, managing your own time, so you know what you're allocating to your job and what you're allocating to the business. And then the most sensible way is to sort of filter it down, so it's like a sliding scale. So if you're doing 5 days a week in a 9 to 5, start ramping up your business, as Ryan said, so that it starts to pick up business, start to get interest, start reinvesting that capital. I would personally say don't expect to get any money out of a business for the first 3 years. I think the first 3 years is difficult to monetize, and actually when you're a lean outfit, you probably want to be reinvesting that capital to get you into a position where the business can feed your income to get you out of the day job. And hopefully your day job would allow you to go to 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and then, potentially quit. But that's a very sensible way. I was a little bit more bullish, and I just sort of didn't work for anyone else. And I just set up the business and pumped that, and didn't have any successes for almost 2 years. When I say successes, no revenue for 2 years. But the reason that I could do that is because up to the age of about 21, I'd saved money, saved a lot of money for a 21-year-old, that I then used as my balance that I lived off. And that enabled me to just go all in and focus purely, literally Monday to Sunday on business.
Yes, it's a very important point that if you can save money and try and bankroll yourself for, like a 6-12 month period where you want to throw yourself at something, it helps you do that transition between full employment and then into, full-time, whatever it is you want to go into. Another thing I'd say though is there's a really good book called Start With Why. And I'm pretty sure it's Simon Sinek, but I might be fucking that up. But Start With Why is a really good book.
No, I think it is. Yeah, it is.
I think it is Simon Sinek. It's more of a mental framing. There's other really good books as well that you can read, but Start With Why is a fundamental one. If you're going to go into a business or you want to start something new, you start with the optimistic mindset and all these things about I can make all this money and do all this and that. But fundamentally, once you've started that business, once it's in the limit and it's at scale, the operational side of it, the making money side of it, isn't the thing that keeps you going through the hard times. It's the actual core driver, the core purpose, which might not be like, changing the world or, something crazy. It might just be that it allows you free time with the family, or it allows you a certain lifestyle privilege. And that can be enough of a why for an SME, but you need to have a good idea of why you're doing it. If it's just, I want to make more money, I just never think that lasts. Like, people eventually just go, do you know what? I can make money working for someone else and don't have to deal with all this shit and this caveat that comes with it. So,
I think, yeah, definitely. And I do, my advice to anyone is like, also, you need to keep your income flow coming in until it's literally like, you can pretty much replace yours by moving from your employment to kind of full time. And the only way you can do that, as Jack said, is by putting hours in, especially in uni days. And then like you can get quoted some of those books like 4 Hour Work Week. But if anybody's actually ever read 4 Hour Work Week, you'll find that they say that you can restructure your business and life to be very efficient and work 4 hours a week and still get great returns. However, in that book, they only did that post making a successful business, if that makes sense. Like if you had so actually the author of the 4 Hour Work Week, if you read the book, was actually working 60 to 80 hours a week to get the business to about $40,000 a month, and only then through re-engineering efficiency managed to change the work pattern to about 4 hours a week. So that's possible, but you can't just go, I'm going to work 4 hours a week and build
a business off the ground.
Because that you're taking what the message from the book is there and putting it into a false reality, because that just doesn't exist.
What's his name again? Tim Ferriss. Yeah. He's a great guy, but I'd never really understood the 4 Hour Work Week. I was just like, yeah, that's great if you've like already built the management team and all this and that and whatever. But
that's I mean, the book, people may disagree with me, but I've read it and listened to it, And the big thing in there is that there's already a successful business. It's already gone past all that effort, like, you know. So
I would also think that someone's got a business into a position where it could be adapted and managed like that. They're probably sharp enough themselves to probably know that anyway. You know, it's kind of like, it's useful to read because there's probably tools and efficiencies in there to improve your business autonomy. And another book reference, which is written by Rob Warrilow, which is Built to Sell, which is, if you build every business to be sold, you're naturally manufacturing a company that doesn't need you day to day. Therefore, it could be a 4-hour work week. But I choose to be in my business even where it might not need me, because I want to grow it. And you know, we see as directors that a director's in a business for growth. You know, I've heard the cliche phrase that a good business runs without you, a great business grows without you. But it's very difficult to get a business to grow without you in it, in my opinion.
I think even successful people, they still keep an arm in their business as a chairman, which will hold the eventual CEO to account. But then really that person is helping that CEO with the idea generation, you know, because that's what I find is you can have really good people, but what I find sometimes is some of those lack is that they don't really generate the ideas. They'll follow the system and the process, but there still needs to be somebody else challenging, and that goes all the way back up to chairman level down to CEO, which typically is eventually can be the kind of founder.
Well, let's dive into some of those bits there, because we did have some questions from before, or topics from before, that we all spoke about, and one of them is, so growing a business versus cash flowing growth, and then the warning signs and what to avoid going bust, and then we'll go on to, like, you know, the actual exit strategies for our business, but the actual growing a business in the first place, so growing it organically, cash flowing the growth, and then the warning signs of how to avoid going bust in all our scenarios for our businesses. You know, how can we, well, what advice would you give? Is we've got the benefit of hindsight here, so we can see things clearly that at the time we were sort of taking gambles, I'm guessing, for us to get to where we wanted to get to. But in hindsight, there's, you know, taking on debt to fund growth, there's taking major risks to hope that the growth will come, and then there's just cash flowing growth steadily. And then how do you forecast and go, fuck, we're going to go bust if we don't change, you know, X, Y, Z. One of you want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So generalized questions around, you know, how to start, scale, grow, manage, run a successful business in any capacity with protecting potential downside. And you know, that I always look at predominantly the three pillars of any business and any project, which is risk, profit, and cash flow. And you always want to make sure that you're managing all three equally as importantly, because you need profit to make it worth the risk and worth cash flowing for. You need the cash flow to get to the profit and to manage the risk, and you need to manage the risk so that the risk doesn't downside a high cash flow, high profitable project. So with any business and with any project, you can monitor those three metrics. So what that may look like in principle is, I've seen businesses. There was actually a business in our industry called JVIP, which was a property development company with, I think, almost 100 unsecured loans in the business. They were bringing loans in to cash flow their business. The principle of the problem is, bringing all of that cash flow in today is borrowing from tomorrow. And if the profit isn't there tomorrow, you shouldn't be borrowing more and filling that pot and making it a worse situation. If they had a big lump of profit at the end, they just need to last out that long, which it sounded like they were good at raising capital to get to that point. But what may happen is, you have two projects that, you know, cost overruns, planning delays, construction overruns. The profit gets squashed from them, so you borrow a bit more, and then two other deals go pop. And the principle is, if the profit isn't at the end, your cash flow is, you're better to rip that band-aid off and go, actually, this isn't working, or we've got a bigger picture in play. Like, you know, Dorian talks about the few years that he went through fixed price contracts. His aim is to get back onto profitable sites. But if those profitable sites aren't profitable because the business model is broken, that would have also been a pointless exercise. But he's now in profitable sites, so it was a worthy dip and ride to go through that process. So that's like the profit has to be there. It's very, very rare that a business in construction or property can operate on a non-profitable business model. It's very common in another business industry, for example, tech or startup businesses. The first 5 years, they might not make a profit, and they might be gaining from market share. They might be opening branches. They might be, boosting their sort of branding or whatever it may be. But in our industry, it's very difficult and not seen very common if you're not making a profit. Then down to cash flow, I personally feel it's probably the harder of the three metrics to manage and handle. Reason being because there's no security on where people can resource that cash flow. Banks are not as forgiving as they used to be. I know someone that run a construction company who's about 42 years old, super successful guy, and he said he wouldn't be able to run his construction company today because people don't offer overdrafts in banks. I mean, you do, but it's like 5K. He said he lived in his overdraft because of debtor days and people that he was paying and managing money. And he said the day he shut his construction company was literally 2 months after the bank said we're actually not going to allow overdrafts anymore. So cash flow is really, really key. And the best thing that you can do for cash flow is forecast well ahead, forecast it against your growth, forecast it against your cost, put contingencies in place, always have a rainy day source of funds that you can dip into as and when you need it. A really good one for that is actually Capital on Tap. We've got Capital on Tap card. At the moment we don't have any facility with the Capital on Tap, but if you need 20k in a day, you can just draw it down, have the money, and then pay it back when that source needs to come down. Just because you might need to get something over the line or whatever it may be.
What's the rate on that?
It's about 3% a month. It's quite expensive, but if you need it for a day or two, it's
better than Iwoka.
They don't charge you though if you pay it back on time. Or is that
that's if you're spending money on the. It's the same card. If you're spending money on the card like a credit card and you pay in the 40-day cycles or whatever it is, you don't pay any interest. If you draw down, so we have a I think a 30k facility in two of the businesses. If we draw down the 30k, you then pay 3% a month on that. But for me, sometimes that money's worth 10% a month to be there at that time.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a good resource that I'd recommend looking up to. If you want a referral code, shout out. We'll have ground up recommendations there. But I think cash flow is the hardest point, and it's super hard for us because I don't know if I've talked about it on ground up so much, but the love heart of revenue and operations is like you always want to be driving revenue, but at the same pace that you can bring in operations to deliver that. And it's called the love heart because it's never a perfect balance. And the issue with that non-perfect balance is you're always resourcing overheads and operations to feed the revenue, and it's never linear. It's never right. It's never, we're as efficient as we can be. Equally as we're growing, as you're growing, your operations will always be undersufficient or oversufficient, and then therefore costly. So you've got to try and balance that act, and that is where cash flow is really difficult because you're resourced. So, for an example, we're resourced to deliver 60 to 80 million in gross development value, but when we resourced for that, we weren't delivering that. So we had to grow into those clothes and sort of facilitate the cash flow so that it could grow into those 2-3 year projects that we're facilitating on. So cash flow is difficult, and I would recommend that. If you have the skills and expertise and time, you partner with someone that doesn't have the skills and expertise of time, or maybe not the time. So you're sharing that sort of resource share. So you're opposing resources and you're sharing that. And then managing risk. If you're not managing risk, I think that's it can all fall on its face without you really knowing. And you go, well, I didn't see that coming, but you could have made plans in place. But the trio triangle, which is different to quality, cost, and Dorian's favorite metric, but we're all about triangles. Maybe we should change our logo to triangles.
Quality, price, speed, the golden triangle.
Yeah,
you can
or
have
risk,
two of the
profit,
three.
cash flow.
Or risk, profit, cash flow. Yeah. I like the 4 pillars from scaling up. That's what our business is. I agree with everything Jack says. It's, those trios are within these 4 pillars basically, which is strategy, people, execution, and cash. And in another way to picture it, in any business you go into, if you take a vehicle expression, which I know Jack will like, then it's from a strategy point of view, the key questions are you on the right path with the right vehicle, basically, which is the marketplace, short term, medium term, long term, is the growth, who are the customers, all of that, who are the competitors, all that sort of stuff. And then have you got the right vehicle and are you on the right path, basically? And if that's the case, you obviously need people. Have you got the right people and they're in the right seats? Basically that is, and then execution, like, are they doing the right things to for the vehicle to go forward? And do you have a live dashboard like everyone does if they're driving a vehicle for those the key KPIs that will basically tell you if you're on track or not, like fuel left in the tank and speedometer and all that sort of stuff, oil heat, etc., who's not wearing the seatbelt. And then finally with cash, which is basically Jack touched on a working capital cycle, it's the fuel. It's the fuel. If you run out of fuel, you could have a good vehicle on the right path with the right people doing the right things with the right dashboard. But if your fuel light comes on, you will still break down even if everything else is working. So that's one of the reasons. That's one of the things I always think about. Basically, there's not a day that goes by in this business where I'm not thinking about those 4 pillars. And sometimes that analogy of the vehicle helps because it just makes sense. Really, that is what we're trying to do.
Dorian, can you pay me royalties for using a car analogy, please?
Yeah,
I'll answer in a slightly different way because what you guys have just said there is obviously great in terms of the thesis, and I agree with everything. And I'll try and use those pillars and that those analogies there for what we actually did to get to where we were. Roughly starting out like you probably should, just on the breadline, trying to make shit happen, and had to borrow a lot of money, had to put every penny we had in, the typical sort of scenario to get something going where you don't have the business yet to be able to look at those core pillars or necessarily have the right knowledge to analyze risk properly. So you have to take on those risks, sometimes naively in the early days, and that's usually where people can get burnt. But in property, you just have to always be figuring out how to raise money and filling gaps in your knowledge, just like continuously doing those things. And obviously finding sites. But always we were trying to raise money, always trying to find ways to raise money, but not for our lifestyles, not to put into the business and pay overheads, but to get product churning, to get sites moving so we can make our project management fees to help keep funding our lifestyle, and then use that proof of concept to market that with content to then try and raise more money and continuously go in that way. So not raising money debt for the business, but raising money to buy sites and make project management fees or share in joint venture deals. And you kind of just do that until you get to a point where, just talking about the debt funded growth or the organic cash flowing growth, you get to a point where you can kind of make a decision, and you can either bring in a partner who will go, right, here's 500 grand of run rate, and build the team and start going, which again is that borrowing from the future analogy, or you just keep living like a pauper and put every penny back in to fund the business side of it. Because the second you take loans or debts out to run the business side of it, you're basically making your necessity for higher returns an absolute requirement. Otherwise you can't afford to pay that back and pay staff, and you can build a debt bubble ahead of you if there's a rainy day. And obviously we've seen a lot of rainy days over the last few years, so it was better that we took the organic growth side of things rather than the debt funded side of things. Both work, but I think there's a period where you just got to put every penny back in, and then if you get it to a more predictable point, which is where you can start analyzing these pillars and see, okay, what's my risk? Where's my cash flow? You should always be looking at cash flow anyway. And then start to maybe borrow money. And we've done that at a couple different points where we needed cash flow for the operational side of things. This is more recent times. And we just, 30 grand here or there to get us through the month, or to get us through to that next core place where we know we have profit landing. But it's always a sketchy time where you're like, I hope that profit lands, because I've got to pay back like an expensive loan or something like that. That's my way of trying to just vaguely talk about our actual journey to here. And we couldn't prioritize those pillars at the start. You just got to fucking throw mud at the wall, didn't you, until you can get it cash flowing nicely.
Yeah, it's difficult though, because as Jack said, without business, it's obviously you have this theoretical plan, right? So if I laid out our business model in theory, and I've done it to, I have laid out and created a business plan, sophisticated and simplified version, to both Cranfield School of Management and their professors, to a Goldman Sachs School of sort of Small Business Growth Community and their lecturers, also the Unicorn School at Goldman Sachs, also countless funds, PE firms, VC firms, investment firms, ultra high net worth individuals. And I'm saying this not from a big-headed point of view, just to show the reality. The business plan that we have, the theory of our business plan is fundamentally sound, of a very sound business model. And I tested it across so many of these different professions, and then obviously in reality. However, there was a big Achilles heel in our model, and it still is, that obviously cost and inflation. And it reared its ugly head from 2021 onwards. And basically, as Jack said, sometimes you'll have the fact that you have a sound business, a theoretically sound business model, but like as you know, if you take any like asset class, even Bitcoin, for example, and zoom out, you'll see the volatility and fluctuation. And there's all these cycles, and sometimes the business gets hit in a bad cycle. And the inflation hit us hard, like everyone else in our sector, where the reality was not the practical was not matching up with the theory, and the business model was looking like it was unsound, unstable, unviable, and like shouldn't even be in here. And the only way to trade out us to the positions, because it was basic maths. You're in a fixed price contract. Costs have gone up 30%. Your margin wasn't anywhere near 30%, and the client's not giving you extra money. What are you going to do? You got two options. You either fold the business, or you find a solution to trade through, which would be a combination of bringing in new equity, new debt, and doing more projects, obviously, that are a better value. It's quite simple. But then your question turns to then, do I bring in this debt that can be expensive and a burdensome to a company? And the reason why we chose to do that, obviously, we traded out that position through a combination of debt and new projects and financial restructuring. The reason why we chose to do that is because we knew that what was happening was not normal business circumstances, i.e., we had to do that for this batch of jobs projects, whereas in reality, in a stable market, you don't need those facilities to trade, and you can pay them down when it happens. So because it was not part of the normal business trading, we chose to bring in the debt, which we knew we would eventually be able to pay off. And then this is the fundamental, if the business model's working capital cycle is structured that you will always have to bring in debt as you grow like that, or to do any deals, that becomes a big problem, because you're never going to be able to get out of it. There's a good ebook called I can't remember what's it called, How Fast Can I Afford to Grow? And it was recommended in this book called Growing Your Business, and it's all about showing and illustrating the impact of a difference in working capital, and how your business model needs to be structured, and as you grow, you're not growing broke, so to speak. But every business model is slightly differently. But as we're talking about property and construction, because it wasn't a normal circumstance, we decided to take on debt to trade out of it. So yeah, unfortunately, that's what happened.
Yeah, mate. Achilles heel is an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, you can prepare for everything, but macro trends. I mean, you can hedge against macro trends, but you only really have that benefit once you're an established business, right? Where you can
everyone has a plan, Ryan, until they get punched in the face. As Mike
face.
Tyson says, I am Mike Tyson.
And how do you think people should best look at identify whether they're going to go broke or not? Because most people don't know they're going to go broke until it's too late. because obviously that's why they go broke, because it's too late. So how can you preemptively look ahead as a development business, preemptively look ahead and understand if you're going to go broke or not?
I think it's all to do with the numbers.
Yeah, scenario planning. Yeah,
it's all to do with the numbers. You can have the best idea, the best team, the best product. You could have the best marketing team, best operational team, best sales team. All of that, obviously is fundamental to building a successful business and getting to the profit. And but it's for me, it's all about the numbers. If you don't, it's kind of like going to the doctor and you've got something wrong with you, but they can't assess you by taking your temperature, by taking blood samples. The blood, everything that you do, the sort of testing on your business is always to do with your numbers. And that's why we invested a small fortune into getting all of our numbers right. A few years into business, we got all the right spreadsheets put in place. We have monthly P&Ls, balance sheets, full management accounts, so that we can actually look at ratios. We can actually look at labor to staff turnover. We can also look at liquidity in the business. We can also see that obviously the cash flow of the business. We can, and in every single SPV project, limited company, we have a full set of accounts every month that I review every month, line by line, even individual asset P&L. So I can see why an asset's not performing, why a bedroom's vacant and what impact that's having, or why our costs were higher that month, or why utilities were higher that month. Obviously, with all the property that we now own, I can't go into that detail without looking at the numbers. It's a lot more efficient way from a sort of managing director perspective. So for me, it's if you don't know your numbers, if you don't know what your cash flow looks like in the next 3 years, detailed month by month, it does change, but roughly, and then also your balance sheet and what that looks, and then your actual A&L sheet on the balance sheet. So what I talk about assets and liability, your balance sheet is obviously telling you what your assets and your business is worth, so you can borrow more or pay down more if you need to. So for me, numbers, that's it.
And there's key aspects, isn't there? So you have to make sure you're as up to date with your numbers as possible. But in terms of actually preventing yourself from going broke, the things you're trying to look for are, is your pricing off? Are you simply just not charging enough? And therefore you're doing all the right things. You got the best team, you got the this, you got the that. But if you're just not charging enough, or you don't have enough margin for the capacity you can run at, then your pricing's off.
Yeah,
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Your gross profit and your net profit will tell you that. You'll see that if you're not producing enough gross profit, your cost of sales is too high or your pricing's wrong. And if you're and what I found, I actually find gross profit margin an easy metric to understand pricing and efficiency of delivery of a product or a property. The really tricky thing from a business owner's perspective, and I've talked about it quite a lot, is taking you from gross profit. So your gross profit is your revenue minus all the costs to that sale. So everything that went into that sale. So using example, our surveying business, if we get instructed on a survey, our surveyor's car, they're driving the kit that we have for the job, them actually going to site, scanning the site, coming back to the office, all the drawing work, all of that is a cost of sale. So our gross profit is how we efficiently deliver that particular product. The net profit deducts all of the fixed costs, which don't fluctuate depending on how busy or how many jobs we don't take on. The net profit margin, in my opinion, is the more complicated thing for a business owner to understand, because that will tell you how much revenue you need to be delivering to cover your fixed overheads, which is understanding your critical mass. So one is efficiency to deliver the sale, and two is understanding critical mass. And they will literally, once you understand all of that, that will depict your pricing point, your efficiency, your overheads, who should be in the team, who shouldn't be in the team, everything that you need to know. So, numbers and finance is literally the root of running a business and making a lot of decisions. There's obviously a lot of decisions you can't make on the finance, like culture, what you actually, the visionaries, what you actually want to do in the business. But it supports, it's the engine of the car. There you go, Dorian, there's your car reference. It's the blood in the body. It's everything that you need in a business. And I think that's where it starts.
And it's importantly knowing, being the doctor in that analogy or the mechanic in that analogy, it's knowing from first principles where to start. Like, rather than look at it and go, do you know what? I think it's our contracts manager. He's just not performing. He's not keeping these sites on budget, or it's our acquisitions guy. He's just not finding enough sites, or blah, blah, blah. If you don't know where to start, so the first thing we'll do is, look at the cost and the duration to raise money to get the sale. So the cost of our sales in time and money, and fundamentally that's the first economic driver for our business. That's like the input function at the start that then funds everything else, and every business has that same point, and it's looking from there and then looking at, okay, are we charging enough? If our team's running super efficiently and everything, and they're ticking all the boxes, and we're on target, on budget, then why are we not making enough money? Is it because the team has more capacity that we're not fulfilling, or is it because we're just not charging enough? And sometimes it's like a simple tweak, isn't it? Literally, if you can raise your pricing by 5% and nothing else changes, then that's all falling to the bottom line, and that can massively impact a business. So you've got to know your numbers, and you've got to know how to look at your numbers, how to understand them, but then also know how to look for where the solution might be without going, it could be here, there, could be here, there, everywhere. You kind of want to start from the start, point of sale, and then work your way all the way through and find out where the inefficiency is, which is probably where most businesses fail, because they just don't know how to do that exercise. They either don't know how to look at their numbers. So many businesses don't run P&Ls, which is nuts. We didn't for a while because we're just too busy, and then you need to bring that in. Otherwise, you just can't make an informed decision. But equally, if you're not good at making the informed decision, then I think that's where most businesses really fuck up. They know what's happening, but
I think as well, though, if you are, it comes back down to dashboarding KPIs across the divisions of a business, and our business is split into divisions from land, the technical, commercial, construction, groundworks, finance, marketing, HR, and office. And each division has KPIs that they look after and report on to me to a monthly basis that I've set them in collaboration with the head of that division to make sure that everyone's on board and engaged. When in theory, if everybody achieves their targets, we will achieve the main company objective, and that's basically been reverse engineered from there. So, but if you are clear, there's that saying, isn't it? It might even be another book, but what gets measured gets done. But more importantly, is if you are clear and everybody knows what you're working to and why you're working to, the number one, once you've got your strategy set and a business plan's in place and there's actually proved the concept, the biggest thing then you really need, aside from obviously working capital, is people. It's people to do it. If everybody's clear what is expected, they will be more engaged. Your team will be more engaged. They will be more on board. They will understand what's expected of them. They will understand when they're failing. They will understand when they're overachieving, and it kind of gamifies work as it should do, and it makes things more easier to achieve or faster to spot when you're not achieving them. So there's no excuse. Every business owner, even if you're starting fresh as a development, this is what I mean. The number one advice I would give anybody to start if they want to get into property investment development is at the very basic level, once they pass the research stage, even when they're in a job, is they've only got to think about, in my opinion, this is just at the very beginning now, pipeline of deals and pipeline of money. That should be their very first two KPIs. Of the number of leads they need, and the goal should be I want to build relationships with 6 investors that I know could at least fund 250,000, for example. That's there as an objective for the next 90 days or whatever, and deal flow as well. I want to find 6 good deals, not necessarily secure them. I want the early stage, but I want to find 6 deals, run appraisals on them, prove they potentially work, and have indicative conversations with those investors about it. I mean, that's it, really. And as the business grows, you can then build, and the other divisions come in. You can then bring in metrics for them. But if you don't start off like that and then make action against those, you're just, it's going to be very hard to consistently get results. Do you guys agree with that, or?
Completely disagree.
Yeah, disagree.
Go on, Jack.
No, I agree. I think obviously that from a obviously Dorian, you have probably more of like an MD role in your business. And I think you probably stepped away from deal finding a lot sooner than most people would in
a
property development or investment company, because I still do spend all of my time managing various businesses or finding deals or finding money, and that's it. That is literally my three roles. Managing the normal things like problems or firefighting or difficult situation with staff or hiring or whatever it may be. So sort of growth and management of the businesses, money raising, capital raising, and finding deals. And that is my full-time job. It's almost like
that is the exact same as me, except for the raising money side now is just marketing, and then I leave Dad.
It's interesting because I stepped away from deal finding really early on, Jack, as you know, and most of my time is spent managing the teams and businesses and the business and reports and meetings and all that. But the other, I'm still heavily involved. It's just me that does the money raising. So it's funny, isn't it? You do it all, Jack, still the deals and money and managing the business. So that's why your work hours are 14 hours a day, and I'm off deals completely, all on managing and still raising money. And Ryan, you are on deals, but you don't do as much of the money, do you?
No, because the marketing can do that for us now. And Dad doing the closing, so creating a system or a systematic approach to raising the money. I still get involved here and there for clients if there's something specific, but really a lot of the time's there. But if I'm spending a lot of my time marketing, so inadvertently I am spending quite a lot of time on raising money. But to me, the marketing's a more scalable way of doing it, which obviously we're all doing as well. But in my business, it's super important that I'm continuously raising money because that feeds what we're doing. Like, raising $1 million is not good enough. I need to be able to raise like $250,000, $250,000, another $250,000, another $250,000, like all the time. Otherwise, it's not we're not getting enough deal flow through, which is an interesting problem to have. But it's better than I'd rather that problem than have to find 10 million. If that makes sense. For now, and in the future, I guarantee I'll look at it and go, "Oh fuck me! I remember I used to have to find $250,000 all the time." Whereas now, just 10 million that'll last me 2-3 years. Which would be a nicer place to be. So what do you think then about exits? Because we touched on exits slightly, but in terms of where we are now as businesses, you build a business, but what do you build it for?
Yeah.
Dorian, yours is pretty clear. So maybe
start with yours. Just before Dod starts, can I just quickly brief why I thought this would be a good idea for the listeners? Is because the traditional exit for a property developer is you build a house, you sell it, and a family move in, and that's your job done. But I think there's various different ways that we all view exits and how we got various different businesses that do things in different ways. So I thought it would be good to sort of go through because we all vary in different ways. So fire away, Dorian.
Sure, cool. All right, so I'm a big believer as The Magic of Thinking Big, right? Another great book, but if anyone listens to this, you've got a good book list off today's episode, but I re-listened to it as well. But I do class ourselves as all big thinkers. So I start with the end in mind. What I really want out of life is I want my own fund, mainly with my own money as well, so I'm in more control of it, and I want I'm going to have a very large fund one day in the built environment sector. I love the built environment sector and everything it stands for and all the potential improvements we can make. And I want to be involved in as many different businesses within the built environment as possible. And I want to be a funder. I want to have my own kind of a deal origination team, and people helping those businesses be successful as well. I think there's nothing better for me personally that would suit my skill sets and strengths. So anyway, that's for the future. So how do I get that? And how do I have to then basically make a lot of money because built environment is actually a capital intensive sector? So Casas Group is, as you all know, a social and affordable partnerships house building company. If you look at the strategy of the business model, there is a housing crisis across across the country. It's only getting worse. Over 1.2 million on the waiting list. England have allocated 12 billion of funding. Wales have allocated a couple of billion of funding, and Scotland even more. So combined, you're talking quite a relatively large market. And then you've got the other subsections as well. But long story short, my business model is reverse engineered back from a national house building company, and it's made up of regional smaller companies all feeding towards that basically overarching brand name. And the regional targets and we're starting with South Wales, is to hand over between 300 and then eventually 500. So it's 300 hyper growth, and then with the pipeline, it matures up to 500 per annum. And it will be in itself a circa 75 to 100 million turnover region, effectively, with a 3-year pipeline, all deals forward sold and being forward funded by customers. And the goal is to expand into on my map, I've got 14 different regions, but anywhere close to that. More in reality, what would happen is when we get to probably 6 regions, depends on the timing of the market as well. So I won't exit until the market tells me is the right time to do so. So I'm not planning for a certain date or anything. But call it 6 regions, 7 regions, 8 regions. I wanted to scale the business so it could float in its own right on the stock market, and then therefore bring in my especially senior management team, director level team, and just any team in general with stock options provides that different flavor for staff retention and incentivization. But I wanted to float in its own right, and then I wanted to carry on retaining the shares of the business and then basically secure against my shares that I have in the business, and to launch my built environment fund off the back of that. So if you think about it, I'm scaling this national business, going to float it. Hopefully it gets valued at 10 times operating profit, or 1 times revenue, something around that. That's not unrealistic from the comparables I've seen. So if we get to 6 regions, all doing 100 million turnover each, 600 million, the goal obviously is to get it to 1 billion, so 10 regions, but we'll see. And then float it. I still own a majority of the business. I can raise money against my shares and launch my built environment fund. Any money I put that money into from that fund will have a return on investment requirement. So I cover my debt costs of raising and overhead costs of running the fund. And I get to have loads of fun while doing it. I mean, why wouldn't you want anything else? And then I can make a global impact. God, I'm just so excited thinking about it.
Yeah, I think you're very clear. Out of all 4 of us, I think yours is a very clear and always seems to have been a very clear exit strategy for you. Maybe slightly different for us. And Jack, how's it different for you, mate?
Yeah, so I split my businesses. I'll split them into 4 to sort of describe on exit. So XP Property, our development company, obviously it's private sales and rentals. I don't think it has a huge value because we're only as good as our last deal. It's not like the sausage factory that obviously not sausage factory, but glorified sausage factory that Dorian has built, where it runs and it grows, without the core members of the directorship within the business. So we're very lean, we're very small. We sort of punch above our weight in terms of revenue that we turn over. But for that reason, we're only as good as our last deal. So we're only really, in my opinion, mainly saleable. Obviously, there's a value to sort of goodwill, reputation, things like that. But we're still young, so that is what I would call sort of like our core business that does feed others. But it's we don't believe it to be that saleable. So our exits on that is selling property or renting property. We're obviously building a portfolio in that business, and I don't believe that we plan to really exit any of those. We'd obviously love to get to a point where we're growing our development company to do is our income, our rental income, will be higher than our business overhead. So goal number 1 is obviously scale and grow that pipeline, which we're doing. And then goal number 2 is to ensure that our rental income surpasses our overheads as a business, so we can be a little bit more choosy and dynamic in terms of what sites we take on and deliver. For an example, we could take on a 3-year strategic land planning play without it impacting the revenue or cost of the business. Second is Central Suites, which is one of my brother's HMO and rental portfolio. That's kind of like what I see as my legacy. It's a higher cash flowing portfolio to promote growth. It's quite a noisy business, HMOs, so I don't want it to be a HMO business completely forever. The goal is to get to 1,000 properties and basically revert them back to single let properties by majority, so that the headache is less, and to keep good income. But that will probably sit in our portfolio for forever. XP Surveys is very different. It's a trading entity. It's a startup business. It's a scalable business. It could be a national business, which is where we're going to take it. And that business will probably be more in line with an exit to a larger player. There's been trades in the market of 4x EBITDA. There was a company actually sold into a private equity fund for 18 million, doing the exact same thing that we do. We've obviously got a little bit to grow to get there, but we're really excited about XP Surveys because we have fundamental processes and tech that we've integrated into our business there's none of our competitors have, which allow us to scale a lot easier and quicker than our competitors. And whether you do a survey in Plymouth or whether you do a survey in Scotland, it's the same product. Whereas in the development company, it's very difficult because you're always trying to manufacture bespoke processes and products to each deal, whereas surveys is very replicable and similar. So the aim is that's our sort of growth business that we want to, really build, grow, and then exit. And then last but not least, our social portfolio, which is fundamentally valued on a yield basis. So we build an income generating portfolio, which is what we've done. The portfolio just brings in just over £1 million net per year. Obviously, well, not net, before mortgage costs. And then because the buyer is looking at buying that income, and then that values up on a yield basis. So we had agreed to sell at 5.5%. It's now the market has actually softened to higher than that. That sale fell through, but the market has actually softened to higher than that. But someone will be buying that income. We're currently stabilising that portfolio because the market's a shit show for a number of reasons. Obviously, interest rates, Liz Truss, and Home REIT going through the scandal or a misrepresentation that it did, which is shaken our market, specifically in London for social housing. It's slightly different to what Dorian does. It's supported living. So we're stabilising that, and we will hope to exit that and sell it as an income generating yield, 10-year government-backed income leases. So there are our main exits.
Yeah, I suppose you've got two clear exits there, haven't you, with the the social portfolio and XP Surveys. It makes sense for those to be built to sell, whether you sell them or not, but they're effectively easier to sell, whereas the development business itself and any retained portfolio is kind of already exited. I suppose you are just looking to build to build. That is the sort of name of the game.
I will actually finalise on one point. I think that XP Property will probably be more likely for some form of shareholder reduction, like Dorian mentioned, like people in the team stepping up, and what that would do is allow us to have more time, less risk, and more probably a smaller chunk of a bigger pie. Is how we see that business going.
Yeah. Well, I won't repeat too much of what Jack said, because effectively we have our lettings business is the only one that's really going to be built to sell. Although we're going to keep it, we have no intention to sell it, but it's the one that we want to protect like a baby, in a sense that we don't want to take any outsized risk. We want to make sure it's always cash flow positive. We want to make sure it's a tight business, and when we do end up trying to scale it with through M&A, which is our main plan at some point, then we want to make sure we're looking after the underlying business case and make sure it's always in a position where it's worth something. Whereas couldn't say the same for the development business, and neither would I know. I don't necessarily have the right knowledge to know how I would value the business. So to me, the main way I value our business is our ability to raise money, our ability to attract investment capital. And I think that in itself has a value. If we can build systems around raising money with the long-term view of ideally setting up some kind of fund, whether it's an equity fund or our own bridging fund, seems like the obvious next thing to do, to lend us. Why not lend ourselves the money rather than constantly going out to the market and again try and retain more margins in house? then I don't see where pipeline does have a value, I suppose, if you're holding a lot of options on sites and things like that. So you could sell those, but our goal is to build a family business that we can retain forever, which is always the plan. And I don't see any point where I would be looking to exit. But I think if we can build a fundraising vehicle that could have some underlying value, particularly if it's got a large client list, if it has this ability to churn through investment capital without necessarily needing a key man like myself or someone involved in that, then I think that's where there would be value in creating a fund, and having that fund would then obviously have underlying value as well. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward, just want to retain and build until it's more clear to me how we would potentially position this business as a sale. But I don't want to sell it. But I think that's probably the same problem most developers have. There's not really a clear way to sell beyond your pipeline, unless your team's just so good and you get to that critical size where you've got all the right management teams in place and everything else, and you've got the IP in the industry and the brand equity. But yeah, it's quite difficult for a development business to be valued, I think, unless there's good examples of that. But I don't know what examples there are of a development business selling.
Yeah, you got to be pretty big. I mean, I would be surprised if there's been many development companies that have ever been sold unless they've got a construction arm. And
there's. So I've looked a lot into the sector because obviously of how I've modelled this business as well, and there's comparables of sales in this space from SMEs all the way up then to country. They were sold to what is now Vistry for $1 billion, I think it was, and they were partnerships arm. But ultimately, how this business it has to basically be medium size or above. So it has to be already turning over like 50 million and above, really, for private equity players to come in to want to buy it. And the exit strategies are three, really. It's four. Either you either sell to your existing team as like kind of management buy-in or whatever, or you can sell to private equity. There's a lot of private equity players who will come to like buy and build, or buy, join, build and sell as well. You sell it to a larger competitor, like I said, country to Vistry, who wanted to go into the partnership space, or bought them for $1 billion, and then float, but you have to be relatively large for that. But not too large, I mean, there are some public companies. They're just not on the like I had a meeting with Springfield Properties PLC up in Scotland. They went public so they could do mergers and acquisitions, and they went from a sub 100 million turnover company to what is now a 300 million turnover company, and really. Once you get, as you mentioned, once you get to a certain level where you've got management teams and a system, and then predictable results and a pipeline and all that sort of stuff, you can and you're doing the delivery, you can then attract a trading business valuation. But on a smaller scale, the development businesses are pretty much worth what the developments they've got in their pipeline are, really.
Unless you have some unique USP, like a really good team that maybe a pension fund would want to buy to,
like there's a development business that M&G invested into because they had a very they developed a very specific sustainable model, a sustainable house type that was like carbon positive. So an environmental fund, societal fund like M&G Investments, basically invested in, but they took a majority position because the value, the risk is high and the value's low for the stake needed. So you could do that, but you might end up as a business owner going into a minority position.
Yeah.
Which is difficult, because how many of you guys would like to report into someone and be told what to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, not at all, really.
That's why we didn't. We went on that 10 million capital raise and got. We were discussing terms, but got a lot of terms where I just thought to myself, I feel like this is going to turn into a job very quickly, and that concerns me, because I'd rather have the headache of my day to day and raise capital independently.
Money has a leash on it, doesn't it? Like money comes with a leash, and however big the money and the terms of the leash. Yeah,
big baggage.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've all experienced that. I think anybody going into property, if you end up doing JVs, you will, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, do some that don't go very well. And they're not necessarily, the deal might not go, might be fine, but the relationship, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because, yeah, it's just difficult.
It's just very difficult. I've got some questions here, guys. Some public questions. If you want to do a bit of a quick fire, nothing too crazy. So here we go. Co-Arc Architects asked, thoughts on using artificial intelligence and machine learning to speed up the planning system without taking away the human element. That's probably not an easy.
Well, I'll answer it simply.
They won't adopt it.
Yeah, I'm for it. They'll be against it, so it probably won't come in unless there's a huge reform.
Completely agree with that. Completely, unless you're looking at the private sector again. So the way I see most councils is it's like walking into an Oxfam and going, right, you lot, I want you to run a business, okay? So all of you come with me. And that is just the sort of nature of dealing with the council.
Be profitable.
Yeah. Margaret, put that down. You've got some work to do.
You're on sales.
That's funny.
I mean, I'd say, there's fundamentally, before the council can use artificial intelligence, we ultimately need to get their responsibilities off their desk.
That really tickled me. That did. I just literally imagined you walking into an Oxfam and you said, "Right, Margaret, pop that fucking kettle down. We got a business to run here."
But on a serious note, for the council, it's like asking them to take a huge leap, but they can't even take the first leap. So we need them to we need the private sector to do more of the fucking heavy lifting first.
It's them being scared of what what that change. Everyone's scared of change unless you're a open-minded, self-driven, aspirational, optimistic person. Which there's a lot of people in the council that are that way, but as soon as you put technical change in it, it's a different language to them.
Yeah. What did you? Interesting. Yesterday, I was with building control on site. There's a bit of a contentious issue, and I was speaking to him afterwards about the new Building Safety Act and how it's looking like the independent surveyors, i.e., private building control, may be getting washed out over the course of the next few years, and it may just all become council run again. And I just asked him for his opinion on that, but seeing as councils are mostly under resourced anyway compared to all the responsibilities on their table, and he said. And he's a good building control officer as well. I like him; he's a good guy. And he said, "Yeah, it'd be great. It will create a universal standard, and you don't have dropping standards from the private sector trying to win jobs and stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, but you then have a monopoly as well." And he went, "Yeah, that is then also something to think about." And I'm like, "No, that is the most important thing to think about. The fact that if everything's with the council, if everything's with one entity, and there's no free market competition, then fuck standards. Just the whole process will get systematically worse." And they just don't understand, even that the councillors and the people who work in the public sector themselves, they just don't see it that way. They think it's like a great or good that the council can standardize things through the government, and they've got the laws and regs and the police behind them to enforce these laws. But that is a monopoly in the limit. And if we continue down that road in property with the planning system and now building control, we're just going to make it worse. Needs to be free market competition, and just which is the answer ultimately to this question, that we need the free market to come in and find ways to implement AI. Because asking the council to do it, I mean, they just
mate. Some of the councils we're working with still want you to send agreements out via post for you to sign in wet signature and send back. I mean, they haven't even adopted. It got to that stage yet. So I mean, they're just so behind and slow, and also closed-minded to it as well. They just don't want to. The problem is when you go into like some of these specialism qualifications and I'm trying to think of the word of basically the sector is classed as a skilled profession. So you've also got to contend with the bodies that are protecting that as well. So if you start bringing in AI into what's classed as a RICS skilled profession, planning level, there is a lot of pushback for it because they're trying to protect that skill. This is bigger than just the planning system. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and there's just no way there's just no way it's going to come from within. Like, it has to come from a public pressure to want to.
It has to come from the Prime Minister. That's where it has to come from.
Literally, and that comes from the public, right? And the public.
Well, it comes from someone.
Comes from somebody, but the Prime Minister will only do things that are politically advantageous, right? So there has to be a public sentiment to want to change these things, and we are seeing that. I do think we're seeing that. Like Labour, it's a big part of Labour getting in their promises to help planning reform and things like that. But
let's be honest about it. Like, I know, take away patriotism away from it, but in today's world, who the fuck would want to be Prime Minister? Like, who would want to do that? Anything you do is going to be pretty much wrong. You'll be all over the news. Your family's going to be targeted publicly, and not only that, you get what, 100 grand a year, 150 grand a year. Why the hell would you want to do that? You make more than that.
To be fair, the Prime Minister's probably looking at us going, "Why would you want to be a property developer?"
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think.
I had a really good reference by Jimmy Carr the other day about Keir Starmer. He said, "Don't you think somewhere in the Midlands and Asda is missing their manager?"
Fucking right, mate. Honestly, guys, fucking. Oh. Anyway, next question. How do we tackle nimbyism in the UK planning system to allow a less conservative approach to development? What do you think about NIMBYs? NIMBYs, by the way, so not in my backyard.
Well,
is the sentiment.
NIMBYism can only be tackled when you take away basically the power, but then you go into like basic. So the weighting. So I'll give you a very quick example, and then you can move on. The problem with NIMBYism, right, and just planning in general, is only the people who are disgruntled by planning typically speak up. So there's a lot of silent people who don't mind if it goes ahead, but they won't speak up. So because you're only getting the attention of the negatives, that goes and feeds, and it actually puts a big strain and resource strap on the council, because we've had a site, literally right now we have a site and it has like 60 objections on it or whatever it is, and some have gone literally. The most we had one was 1,000 objections on a site of 14. So we had this one objection at one site, right, 40, 50 objections. The planning officer told us that they have to write up all of the objections and responses to all of the objections, and a lot of them are just irrelevant. And because of that, because it will now delay the planning application going to the one committee, and they only do one committee per month, so it's now going to another month, just because, so they say, of that, because no one else can do it. So NIMBYism does affect, even if the site goes ahead, it just delays things. The only way to get around it is by removing that element of drain and control, really. So, and that's it. It's being much more quicker by people can provide their objections, but only the ones that are relevant are going to be wrote up. If the objection is irrelevant, they don't have to do a war and peace explanation about it. They can literally just tick a box and not relevant, and then it has no weight to the planning system whatsoever. But then the other thing then is committees, because NIMBYism, if it's powerful enough, if the people are local, connected enough, all it takes is them jumping onto councillors who will jump onto others, and you can get this lobbying effect. That so I would actually, I'm not a fan of committees. I think committees are really I've seen how corrupt they can be, and I think it's not fit for purpose, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. I've actually heard planning officers say that as well. Quietly, obviously. So I just think the committee's like, why do we spend all of our time putting together this, putting together the proposal, spend months and months doing it, working with highways, all the professionals, all the material grounds to support it in planning, and then it goes to a bunch of, councillors who aren't educated, don't make the right informed decision, and they can just reject it and waste all of our time. So I can imagine planning officers having really quite a frustrating relationship with the councillors on certain occasions. So it's like it's infighting as well. It's not even just an us and them.
Yeah,
it's within the council. Yeah. All right. Next question then.
Oh, Jack, did you have anything on that? Are you good?
No, I mean, it's obviously the current planning framework. We actually talked about. I went to an event and they were talking about should it be completely changed to a national policy, which is kind of what you touched on. With committee. So obviously the current format of planning is national policy, district policy, and then parish policy, and kind of it's all got to fall in line with all. But we've had some absolute utter shit shows of NIMBYism, and it really frustrates me, because normally the NIMBYs have way more time than anyone else.
Yeah.
But they do obviously have a lack of knowledge. So yeah, it's a difficult friction to deal against, because they are intimately affecting your site if they are that close, to be on site. For an example, we had a objection of a house over the road, which was about 100 meters away from our site, and we were raising the ridge of this property about 7 inches, and they said that it would put their kitchen in complete darkness all day. And that's the sort of stuff that you deal with in our seats, and you just sort of like, well, it's not really going to do that, is it? You probably wouldn't even be able to notice a difference from your kitchen about the height of the roof. And it's always that sort of drastic.
Yeah, drastic.
Their life's going to end, when in actual fact you're supporting more housing for people that are less fortunate. So yeah, I mean, it's super difficult. Hopefully, I think that I always believe that planning policy doesn't care about opinions, and if we can wean out opinions, that would make everyone's life a lot easier. And I think that an easy way to combat that is when it goes to when it goes to the community for their reviews. I think people should be ticking policies of concern that they are concerned about. So, for an example, right for light or design or whatever it may be, so that they can actually click a subcategory of what policy they are concerned about, because otherwise you just get their opinion, and opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one. Like, it doesn't mean anything in planning law or planning framework. So for me, I just feel that it's very talky and not very, it's very qualitative information, where you can actually make it more quantitative information on which policy they actually have an issue with. Then obviously, if everyone clicks on a certain policy, you will get a ratio against that policy, which might need to be addressed. And then it gives the person that's doing the planning application a clear indication of concern around a certain area. But if you had 10 complaints and they're all different areas, it's probably a fine application. But if you get grouping, and I also think it should be almost like sealed bidding, so they shouldn't see what other people have said on which policy. Obviously, they might get together and click that, but you could actually say you're not allowed to speak to anyone else in the local vicinity, and if you do, it's against the law. And that is how I feel it should be: a completely non-biased view, where people don't club together and just say their opinion. Do I like it? No, yes, no. It's got nothing to do with what someone down the road thinks. It's your opinion, and that's that.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I don't really have anything more to add to that one. Other than, there's an element of social media can be a true democratizing force if it's used well. And I think the more public forums like this, where we're talking about it, and where I vlog as well and talk about council and planning, and others do, and I think the more it becomes public sentiment, the more it's spoken about, the more hopefully there'll be an appetite for a solution. But other than that, it's just such a fucking complicated issue. Not in my backyard. Like, everyone's got their human rights and their property rights and things like that. And it's just, where do you draw the line? Unfortunately, the line's bespoke every time, and that's a big part of the problem. Next question. And are you guys strapped for 8:30? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll do this one, and then we'll
right.
Yeah.
Last question, then, guys.
To
So do you think there's a big market for institutional investors to enter the UK rental market, similar to the US Blackstone model? What do you think, guys? I mean, this is already happening.
Well, it's already happening.
Yeah.
They already are. I mean,
I don't think it can be as aggressive as the US, because it's just the US is so much bigger.
No, I don't think it'd be. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, England's really bitty. It's really, really the amount of times that we met with big players about our social portfolio, and I shit you not, 20 meetings back to back, the feedback was, it's a bit granular. And they literally said the same sentence over and over again. And it's because we're just not a huge country with loads of land that can just keep throwing things up in timber frame, and you're off. So I think
the yields are better in the US. I know that. I know it's area dependent, but the gross yields of an investment of a proper rental over here, the gross yields are like, well, in America, obviously I'm not experienced it, but from what I've seen, especially a few years ago, I don't know if it's changed, that double digits gross yields is not uncommon. We're over here in the residential market for single let family housing now. Double digits of 10% above gross yields is quite uncommon. It's not like that at all.
I'd have I agree that the UK is a whole different market to the US, but what I can see happening, and I sort of touched on this in the last podcast, is there's huge money out there, huge capital out there. Typically, this stuff's getting thrown into major companies, particularly the tech market, as we've seen over the last sort of 25, 30 years. But it's going to become harder and harder for these big, capital players to distribute that much capital in a market where costs may be volatile, coming down, harder to predict economic movements. Is a business model still viable in years to come? So I think there's going to be a large appetite from sovereign wealth funds to your Blackstones, your BlackRocks, to pension funds, institutional capital, where they will likely buy into some of these PLCs, the house bashers, the apartment guys, knocking up apartments left, right, and center. There's already a build to rent model there. But what these bigger players will do is accept much lower returns on capital, as they already sort of do. So they would probably be willing to work or buy persimmons and build out a portfolio that they do actually retain, even if it's like 2-3% yields, initial yields. But they've then got the capital play behind it, and it's helping them build up that fund. I can see that happening, a transition with our big house builders and the private guys being able to sell out to the big institutional capital, where they have to get money out the door, but they can't deploy it in the capital markets the way they have been, like tech and VC. And instead, they'll look to houses and the housing market as a secure way to park large sums of money much easier than they can in like more convoluted market like the tech market or the AI market or something like that. I don't think it's going to happen today, but I think that's a transition that's going to happen. So you won't see PLC selling off into the private sector on a plot by plot basis. It'll be more like XYZ sovereign wealth fund or whatever comes in, buys up all those plots as they come out, maybe churn them over time, but they're probably just likely to retain them for a low yield because it's one of the best investments out there compared to what they can get in the market. I don't know what you guys think about that.
In their model, it's not just yield they look at. They will model in capital appreciation as well. Which so if they put it down for a 10-year time horizon, 15-year or 20-year, there will be the yield, which looks on the face of it is low, 3%, 4%. But then if those assets are capital appreciating every year as well by 2%, by the time that 20-year period is up, all of a sudden the return is actually quite acceptable.
Yeah. And I would also say that their pot is never into one place. They'll always have diversification across their portfolio. And normally quite a large chunk of institutions do like real estate. Particular sector in real estate is sort of down to probably management and their infrastructure above of their plan, but they will have pots that go into different areas. But I frequently find that what we're doing currently, well, speaking for myself, is too granular for the institutional players. They would look at student blocks, build to rent, big commercial plays like big commercial parks. But I kind of feel that the US take it to a whole new level. I've got a friend who lives in Reno, and he lives in an estate that was privately built and owned, backed by some form of institutional fund. And I think there's something like 6,500 houses on site. And you just don't really get that in the UK. Like, that is bigger than a lot of our towns. And that's plugged onto the side of a city. But guess what? It's happening in 5 different locations in the same city. It's just a different ball game, and easier for bigger institutions because they do DD once and they buy that. They invest in the asset, and there's a lot better return on their time.
Yeah. I think it's. I don't want to sound, put my AI hat on and go all crazy on it, but I do think with AI coming into the tech market in the way that it is and disrupting the flow of capital, I do think there's going to be a flight of capital out into other markets, and Bitcoin's going to be one of those markets as well. We're already sort of seeing that, but I think the housing market is, definitely one of the biggest asset classes that where they can deploy that amount of capital that easily. If let's say sovereign, the Saudi wealth fund comes into the UK and wants to deploy £1 billion. I mean, how do they deploy $1 billion the quickest? I mean, their best thing is to go in and buy a Redrow, buy a Persimmons, even on a pretty extortionate rate, on the basis they'll have that 10, 20, 30 year horizon where they're benefiting from, UK judicial system, UK asset backed housing market. I just think that is the natural way things are going to go. What does that mean for the SME though? It means we're probably going to get squeezed quite a lot because they don't need the kind of returns we do. So it's going to be an interesting market over the next 10 years. But there's still going to be those pockets of sites and smaller sites where the SME can participate. But I think the bigger house bashing sites, I just think it's going to be.
It's always going to be the way that the bigger the deals, the smaller the margins. The bigger the raise, the lower the cost of finance. So we're playing this game where we've got higher margin deals for a lot more work, and our finance is more expensive.
Yeah.
As soon as you get economies of scale and you goes up, margins get finer, should get minor in on average predictions, and the finance should get cheaper. But then obviously you're playing with finer margins. It's kind of like a lot of business owners go through that phase when they go from lifestyle to an actual commercial enterprise.
Yeah.
Do they want the headache for similar returns, similar margins to take that scale?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. So nice question. Whoever asked that, I think it was anonymous.
Great question.
But watch this space, I suppose, is the way to look at that. I think next year we'll see some more movements. But anyway, that is another episode.
We're gonna go make some money.
Let's go make some fucking moolah, baby. But thanks for anyone who's listening. We release these episodes every Thursday at 5:30 a.m. on Spotify and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and follow. And let us know what else you want to see. We are doing some talking in the background about ways to progress the podcast and our presence in the property space. So we won't do anything drastic this year, but next year, hopefully some more interesting stuff to come. But thank you. Big love to anyone that listens on a regular basis. We appreciate you. And hopefully useful conversation. Safe one. Eternal triangle, man.
Ground up sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deal. We lay